Hi, and thanks for joining me. I'm Trisha Lamina. I'm a program specialist over at the San Luis Obispo County SELPA, and we're just going to take a quick look at IEP basics. We're doing a whole evening training on this, but I just wanted to give a quick little snippet of some tips and tricks that you can use going into the IEP meetings. So a couple of things we'll look at, some acronyms. We're going to look at the actual IEP documents, some what to expect, and then some tips that you can consider for going into the meeting. So for this section, I'll just let you pause it and look through it. We have so many acronyms in special education, it can make your head spin. So it's good to get familiar with this. But again, in the IEP meeting, if they're using lots of acronyms, make sure that you are asking them for either not to use the acronyms or when they do to explain what those are so that you know what is happening. So the IEP process, gives you kind of an overview of what you can expect in the flow of the meeting. So they're going to talk about if this is an initial or a reevaluation year, which happens every 3 years. They're going to start off the meeting with assessment. So they're going to look at the testing that was done and look at current needs and strengths, weaknesses, all of that. So that leads into then the eligibility, how your child qualifies for special education, which then leads into present levels where we're identifying those needs of areas that we need to focus on, which then identify the goals that we need to write. And then based off of those goals, how are we going to address them? How are we going to teach that? And that would be our services. So specialized academic instruction, speech and language, OT, and there's many more. And we always want to consider, and this is the law makes us consider this, and it's important that we do, is always considering the least restrictive environment. So we want to have our students in general education to the fullest extent possible based on the light of their disabilities and unique needs. So let's continue on, and we're going to look from start to finish. What do the pages look like and what to expect? So first of all, your IEP team members, you have your mandatory members that need to be at the IEP meetings, and that's your special education teacher, a general education teacher. Even if your child is not in general education at all yet, they need to be there to help identify what type of things are happening in general education. What are some of the standards? What are some things that can be expected if we would like to push them in for a period of time or when they're out at recess? So the general education teacher is there to support that. And then there'll be an administrative designee, so someone that can approve anything that may cost some money or any program changes or anything like that. So you need to have someone there that can make those kind of decisions. And then a parent or guardian, very important part of the IEP, and then a student when appropriate. And definitely as they get older, we want to make sure that they're present and speaking about their plan. So some additional members that might be there. So if they have speech and language or an OT, those members need to be at the meeting as well. If they are in high school and they have a high school counselor, so that person can speak to scheduling. If a mental health therapist is involved, any outside agencies that are working with the student, and then any other participants that you would like to, as a parent, invite to the meeting. You do need to make sure that you are letting the team know that you are bringing additional participants so that they are prepared as well. So for the very first page that you're going to see is the info, we call it the info eligibility page. And that one has, your student demographics, so birth date, grade, name, all of those indicating markers that we need to have, as well as the due dates for when. So we, by law, have to meet annually, and we need to make sure that we hit it before that date. So you're going to have those dates up there at the top, as well as when their next eligibility evaluation will happen, which happens every 3 years. And then the qualifying disability is down towards the bottom. And that will only change when you do assessment. So if there was an assessment completed, they'll look at that qualifying area. So the next page is what we call the present levels. And this is a very, very important page and probably where you spend a lot of your time. So on this page, you're going to identify those strengths and interests of the student. And this is a really important part for you as a parent to be participating in. We're going to identify parental concerns. So if you want to write those down ahead of time, that's a great thing to do so that you're ready and prepared for that. I find I've sat in hundreds of IEPs, and sometimes parents start to feel a little bit overwhelmed, which is completely understandable. And so just having something written down, you have a better chance of remembering all those little things that you are concerned about and want to have addressed during the meeting. They're going to identify levels for academic and functional performance. And then based off of all those things, so by the time you finish reading the present levels page, you've given your input, the team has given theirs, you should be able to clearly identify where those goals should be written. So goals are only going to be written in those areas that have been identified as a need in order for them to make educational benefit. So it could be in reading fluency, there could be one that's around behavior, or, transition if the student is older. So looking at kind of those vocational type skills. So really the present levels is this very important guiding page to help us then determine the other pieces of the IEP. So we're identifying those needs and concerns here so that we can then address it throughout the document. So if your child is 16 years or older, there's also going to be a transition plan. And this is going to look at how are we getting the student prepared to leave high school. Maybe they're going to go into the adult program, but then after adult program, what are those things? What are their interests? What do they want to pursue? And what are some things that we can be doing at the high school level to help them prepare for that. So they're going to give assessments to see, maybe they like working with their hands. They like working outside. They love working with animals. So they're going to help identify those through some transition assessments. They're going to identify post-secondary goals. So what do they want to do for education? So I want to go to Cuesta College and do the Cuesta Promise. Employment, I want to become a veterinarian technician. Independent living, I want to live independently by myself in an apartment or with roommates. So they're going to identify what are the hopes and dreams of that student. They're going to identify graduation requirements. So what classes do they need to take in order to graduate? What type of graduation path are they on? A diploma, a certificate of completion. And then they're also going to talk about age of majority. When a student is 18 years old, all rights are transferred into their name. So they need to make sure that the student and the family is aware of that. And then they're going to talk about conservatorship, whether the student is conserved or not. So then we move into the special factors page, and this is really for special factors. So those things that don't apply to all of our students, but we want to make sure that we are talking about them and indicating whether it's a need or not. So assistive tech, low incidence equipment is for students who have mobility issues, blind or visually impaired, deaf or hard of hearing. We also address students who are English learners and how are they going to receive that instruction, instruction to help provide what they need in the area of their language acquisition. And then we're also going to look at behavior. So again, not a lot of these things may not pertain to your particular child, and that's why we call it special factors, but we still go through it and make sure, are we missing anything? Are there any of these special things that we need to consider for the student? Then we get into statewide assessments. And statewide assessments, it's not like how we had it when we were younger, right, with pencil paper. This is all through computer. So really there's already a lot of embedded supports in the system that the student can access. So if you may say like, oh, they do much better when they can highlight something that's already embedded. So really what the team is going to talk about along with you as the parent is what are those additional things beyond what's already part of the testing program. And so it could be text to speech, or it could be it being read aloud by not a computer, but by a human. It could be they need a separate space, whatever it might be. So really there's these things that are already embedded, and then the team is going to look beyond those particular areas on what the student needs. For goals, going back to the present levels, I talked about how important that present levels page is. From there, the areas of need were identified. And now, we looked at special factors, we looked at what the student would like to do for transition, and now we build the goals. So that's why we go in this order when we have these IEP meetings. So that present level page is so super important. So then based on those areas of need that we identified, goals are going to be written. So, you may have 1 or 2 goals, you may have 3 or 4. You really don't want to have too many though, thinking, you got to remember, like, these all need to get worked on. So having too many goals can help actually hinder them making progress on the other ones. So thinking about what are those critical pieces, what are those things that we really need to be focusing on working for the year. So with that, a baseline is going to be written, and I'll show you on the other page real quick. Actually, I can right here. So this baseline is going to be written, and that is the starting point. So where is the student currently performing in that skill area? So that's a place where we can start the measurement. And then we can look in a year based on that baseline and based on where we wanted them to go, how much progress was made. So you want to see data in that baseline, like they are able to get 3 out of 10 comprehension questions correctly at the 3rd grade reading level. We want a number there. And then the annual goal is, where do we want them to get in 1 year? We want it to be rigorous, but also realistic based on the student's disability. So that can be a little tricky. So that's a good spot for the team to really talk about. Do we feel like the child can get there in a year? Or did we shoot too low? Did we shoot too high? So that's a great point for you to be part of that discussion when looking at goals. And then we're also going to look at if it's an academic goal, it needs to be aligned to grade level standard. Even if your child is not at grade level standard, the standard spiral, so you follow the line, and the team can help you identify that. So they might be at 7th grade, but reading at a 2nd grade level. The Common Core standards, they're all aligned. So they're going to start at 7th grade and identify that specific skill that's at their current level. We want to make sure they're linguistically appropriate based off if they're a second language learner or not. And then if there's some transition area we need to consider. And then we also need to look at the person responsible. So this is what the page will look like. So area of need, maybe it's reading fluency, their baseline, they're reading 20 words per minute at a 2nd grade level. We're going to have an annual goal. They're going to get to 50 words per minute at the 3rd grade level, right? And then we're going to make sure that we are connecting it to standards, or is addressing something else from their disability? Is it connected to transition? And who is responsible for this? Okay, so really from there, we want to look at, we've seen the present levels, we've talked about present levels, we've talked about goals, and now we're going to look at, based off of these goals, how many service minutes or what services do we need to provide in order for them to meet those goals? And we want to do that all in general education to the greatest extent possible, knowing that obviously, not always can we have them in general education all day. So what is the least amount that we can pull them out? And for some students, it still may be 100% within a special day class, because that is appropriate based on the student's disability. But the law requires us to look at that least restrictive environment. Okay, so let's look. Sorry, I moved my head around here. So what does that mean? What is that continuum of services that we are looking at and thinking about as an IEP team? And really the least restrictive is obviously 100% in general education. They are with their general education peers all day. And then it moves across. So it's general education with some in-class support, some pull-out support, a combination of both, only special education, and then all the way to the most restrictive where they're in a complete separate school than their general education peers, or they are at home receiving their instruction through home instruction, and they're not seeing any students. It's just solely them. So with knowing that, as we then look at the services page, there's actually 2 different services page. On this first one, we're going to look at what are some considerations that the team wants to think about. So maybe it's learning center, maybe it's a special day class. So they're going to list out all those things that are potential ways for the student to be able to work on and meet their goals. And then they're going to think about, okay, so if we do pull out the student, let's say for 30 minutes a day, what are going to be those harmful effects? And that may be that they are going to miss, like 30 minutes of art with their general education peers, which can be very enriching. And so then you're going to have that discussion, right? Then they're going to look at the program accommodations and modifications. So based off, we're saying, here are their needs, here are the goals, and here are the additional supports, these accommodations and modifications that we need in the classroom to be able to meet those goals and be able to meet and have the greatest educational benefit for that particular child's needs. And so this could be a text to speech. It could be being able to take their tests in a separate setting, to have the work broken into chunks. So really looking at what are those needs of each individual student. And then you have the other supports section down here at the bottom. And that's looking at, are there additional people that are helping them through the day? Maybe we have an aide going with them to PE. So this is the area that we want to identify those particular things. So sometimes I have parents as I'm working with, and they say, my child's supposed to have one-to-one support in transitions. So that's the section where it would be written. So that's the box that you want to look at for that. Okay, so then it gets into, and I'm sorry, I didn't put that on there. It gets down into then identifying the services. And the services are going to tell you whether it's academic instruction, they're going to be pulled out, or there's going to be push in, or how is that going to be done and how many minutes per week. It's also going to identify any speech services, OT services, any of those things that they, on top of general education, those specialized services that the student is going to be receiving. Okay, and then we get into this other page, which is called the offer of FAPE, and that's free and appropriate public education. We're going to identify where is their education going to happen. And we're going to identify the percentage that they're in general education and out of general education, and any other agencies that are involved with the student that need to be identified. And then we get to the consent page, and the very top portion here of the consent page, this is just for your signature. So this is not just for your signature, it is for your signatures, but it is just for you to identify that you participated in the meeting that day. That's all the top part is. You aren't consenting to anything when you're just signing the top. It's just saying, I was here, I was present at the meeting. Now, when you get further down the page, this is when the IEP team is going to walk you through and talk you through this part. So if you agree to all parts of the IEP and you're like, yep, stellar, like loving what's happening here, you're going to check that box and then do the rest of the signatures. If you agree to the IEP, but there's some exceptions, let's say I agree to everything except for the goal in speech and language, let's say, you're just going to fill that right in, right? So you're the exception of speech and language goal. And then what happens from there, the meeting is concluded, and then they're going to schedule time to work through and figure out how can we create a different goal? How can we look at maybe there was some additional assessments that need to be done? And so there'll be a problem solving session after that to figure out, how can we look at this exception that you're having, and are we able to work through something? There's some other boxes that probably not going to look out too much. Then you're going to sign here. You're going to sign for involvement or check for involvement. And then there's some other pieces that the team can walk you through. So again, you sign up here for participating only, then you move into consent of whether you agree to it or not. Okay, some little tips that I could offer as been doing this for a very long time as an IEP team member, and now as helping parents work through this process. Really think about having some pre-meeting conversations, so not waiting until the day of the meeting to have your first conversations. Really talking ahead of time. Here are my concerns. What are you seeing with my child? What do you think we're going to discuss at the meeting? And that way you're feeling comfortable going into it. I know what to expect. I know kind of around the area what kind of goals are going to propose. Also asking to get a copy of that IEP in advance, even if they just have a very rough draft, so you are able to better participate when you are in that meeting instead of seeing it for the first time. Go back and review the current IEP that you've had for this last year, and so that you are comfortable with, what was the starting point. So when you're going and you're drafting a new IEP, you know already what was in there. And then I highly suggest that you write down any questions, concerns, requests that you might have, because once you get into that meeting and everyone's sitting around the table and you're discussing so many things, it's so easy to forget and be like, shoot, I had everyone at the table and I forgot to ask blah, blah, blah. So I highly suggest that you have all of those things written down in advance. And at the end of the meeting, when they say, are there any other questions or concerns, look through it, make sure you got through everything before closing up the meeting. Some other tips to consider. Write it down when you're in the meeting. Write down people's names. I talk to parents a lot of times. I'm like, well, who was the special education teacher at the table, or who was the administrator? And I'm like, I don't remember their name. This is how they looked. Write those names down and their roles. That way you can refer back to it later, especially if you had questions or want to follow up with an email later. Write down those things, like maybe the teacher said, I'm going to have to get back to you on how they did on that last test. Write that down so you can send an email reminder. And points that were discussed, next steps, all of that. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Questions are really important. Being in special education for so long, I forget that I'm speaking a whole nother language. Special education is its own language at times. So don't be afraid to ask those clarifying questions, or can you explain that further? Or what will I miss if we do this? Or how will people communicate with me? Who do I contact? What do I do if, right? Ask the questions. And don't be afraid to express your concerns and also your agreements. Like, that sounds like a great idea. I think we should definitely do that. Or I'm really worried if they're out of class for that long that they're going to miss art, and art is very important to our family and to my child. That's what gets them up in the morning. So make sure that you are being part of this meeting. Your voice is very important. Here's another document that you can screenshot. It's embedded in the slide deck when it comes to you through email. And this was a great from our system improvements for the state. They created this parent checklist for IEP meetings. And so it gives you the before, it gives you the during, and then it gives you the after. So this is a good document for you to take a look at and see if there's any additional little tips that you could get. So the last thing I want to let you know is at the San Luis Obispo County SELPA office, we are here. If you have an IEP question, just give us a call. We can talk you through it. If you had some concerns after the meeting and you feel like the team wasn't supporting you and you need to talk to somebody else, just give us a call. That's what we're here to do. We also do alternative dispute resolution and prevention. So if there is any conflict that you're having with your IEP team and you need that additional support, just give us a call and we can help support you in that area. Be sure to follow us on social media and again, call us anytime. Thanks everyone.